Hello, I'm Dr. Pierre Simon, and it's great being back with you. We're in the end portion of this series on unmasking addiction. I hope you've been enjoying it. Next time we'll be finalizing it, or I should say concluding it next time. Very interesting, a lot of things to talk about and a lot of things we weren't able to talk about because of time. But I'll be putting all this together. There are PDFs available, but I'll be putting it all together in a book form later on that you'll be able to have access to if you so choose. Unmasking relapse prevention is the category that we've been in the last few sessions. And today we're talking about option reduction. Now, it's kind of a strange topic, option reduction, but it's just what it means. Options are reduced. There's nothing left. What else is there to do? So when someone is in treatment and then they're in recovery, during that recovery period, they're going through all sorts of things, and hopefully they're getting better and they're doing well. But some have more difficulties than others. And as those difficulties increase, there's a point in time when they're recognizing, gosh, I don't have a lot of options here. I need my drug, or I need this, or I need that, or I need the escape, or whatever it might be. I don't have access to this person or to that activity or whatever, because they're getting so angst on the inside that it's hard for them to think and problem solve and consider. And now the stress is building so much that it's just imploding. So they're sort of imploding on the inside, and that's recognizing option reduction. We want to catch that before it gets into complete relapse. But oftentimes when it hits that point of option reduction, the most important thing is asking for help. And most aren't going to do that. They're just the pride or whatever it might be in them. They're just going to take that habit and return to the habit to feel better as quickly as they can. And then there's relapse, and we'll talk about that next time. But we want to catch that in this period of option reduction so we don't have to go into the relapse. So we can help this person, or we can help ourselves when we're reaching that point of everything is closing in on you. And that's not just for addictions, it's also for other things, anxiety, depression, breakdowns occur at this point. This is that very last moment before the breakdown occurs, the nervous breakdown that so many people have. We want to catch it at that moment. And the simplest way to catch it is ask for help. Reach out. Don't just let it happen, because then it's going to take that much longer to recover and that much longer to get back to where perhaps you were before this option reduction occurred. So there's a perception of diminished choices with option reduction. And those diminished choices are cognitive distortions, emotional dysregulation, external factors, the things going on around you, learned helplessness. And that takes a little while, but boy, when you get that learned helplessness, it's I can't do anything. Neurobiological factors, so the things going on in the brain, those things that we have changed in our brain as a result of either addictions or depression or anxiety or other things. And lack of support. When I recognize the support's not there, I've pushed people away, or I've rejected people, or I'm staying home and I'm not participating. The support's not there. So that lack of reduction, we're going to talk about each of those. Cognitive distortions is the first one. And cognitive distortions is thinking patterns that become skewed in some way. It's as an example might be all or nothing thinking. Either you're all bad or you're all good. There's no in between. I feel great, I feel horrible. There's no in between. You see things black and white, and there's nothing in the middle. Overgeneralization is another factor of skewed thinking. It's exaggerating a little thing, making as they say, a mountain out of a molehill. When someone's not feeling bad, just everything seems worse, doesn't it? Even if you have a cold, everything just seems worse. And that's what occurs in recovery. And when you reach this point of option reduction, everything seems much worse. And so the next thing that occurs with skewed thinking is catastrophizing. Just, everything is just horrible. The mountain is going to fall. The building is going to collapse. You name it. Yeah. If you think back in your life, think of those moments where you've had that catastrophizing, and you'll repeat it again. It's stored in there, so it keeps coming up if you don't deal with it. And we'll talk about some more about that later on. They might perceive with cognitive distortions or skewed thinking, disturbed thinking. They might perceive situations as hopeless or feel that they have no control over their circumstances. It leads to the feeling of limited options and the perception or belief there's no hope. And we don't want to get to that place of there's no hope. That's helplessness. Helplessness is a form of depression. At times we can feel helpless, but if it gets in depth, if it extends, it's going to turn into depression. Emotional dysregulation is another thing that occurs. Now, emotional dysregulation, I think when you watch TV and these movies and all that, you see some people, they just kind of get hysterical over little things. That's emotional dysregulation. They're exaggerating something that shouldn't be expressed to that extent. Or they're going the opposite way. They're exaggerating, minimizing whatever is happening to an exaggerated point, and it shouldn't be that way. We want to have that balance. So lack of emotional awareness occurs with emotional dysregulation, and that's difficulty in recognizing and understanding one's own emotions. I should know what I'm feeling, when I'm feeling it, how I'm feeling it. Where is it occurring in my body or in my head? Is it in my legs? Is it in my arm? Where is that emotion occurring within me? And how can I control it to keep or to maintain self-control? Emotions are very important, and they can cause us to think wrong, do wrong, misperceive things. Just emotions alone can occur where we will end up making things much worse. And in option reduction, things are made much worse. It's like you're in tunnel vision, and it just feels horrible. Everything is horrible. Everything is dark, and so on. Impulse control difficulties occur with that emotional dysregulation. That's acting impulsively without considering consequences, often driven by intense emotions. So when someone has that emotional dysregulation and they have intense emotions, they're going to become more impulsive with the intense emotions versus those that go the opposite way. They're going to be less impulsive. They're going to be like those, what do they call them, anteaters or whatever. They go real slow. You see those animals that go real slow. They're not going to be impulsive at all. But when they get excitable, watch out. Anything can occur. And they're often saying afterwards, I'm so sorry I said that, or I'm so sorry I did that, or I didn't mean to do that. And sometimes violent things can occur, very, very damaging things because of that impulsivity. Emotional dysregulation includes that an inability to use strategies to think through things and modulate the emotions. So I want my emotions to be balanced. And if there's a lot of stress going on, yeah, I might allow my emotions to increase a little bit, but there's a cap. There's a restraint that I'm going to use to contain the emotion within this healthy range where I can still problem solve, where I can still think through whatever's going on, where I can still maintain composure with whatever's going on. And you see these individuals that they're way up here. They're not composed. They're not thinking through whatever they do. They're impulsively doing something. And sometimes you see that on TV where somebody's going to a store and maybe they got caught shoplifting or something, and they're way up here, some of them, and they just do terrible, awful things that, you know, you wonder what's going on. Why don't they just say okay, you know, or whatever? But they're up here. They're in a psychosis, or you might say a delusional state up here. They're out of touch with reality when they allow those emotions to destabilize, to become out of modulation, to get to a point where difficulties in problem-solving the situation will occur. And when someone is in that state of option reduction, they can't think through, what do I do next? Which makes it hard to ask for help, because they're not thinking about, what do I do next? Oh, I should ask for help. They're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, or this, I can't take this anymore. Now the memories are coming up of what gave them relief in the past, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So the intense craving for a substance can override other emotional responses, narrowing their focus to immediate relief rather than long-term well-being. External factors also come into the picture with option reduction. So that's your environment or your social environment, things going on around you, or where you might live, the stress that's going on or occurring within that environment, your exposure to cues associated with the previous substances. You go to the store and you just happen to be next to the liquor aisle, and oops, you know, and you see those bottles, you know, that's exposure or cues associated with previous substance use or abuse. That can trigger that tipping point. It can be something that now you're in this option reduction and, oh my gosh, you panic and you grab that bottle, or you panic and you do something you wouldn't normally do because you were in this relapse, pre-relapse state of option reduction. In such contexts, the individual may feel that returning to the substance or returning to the addictive behavior is the only way to cope with what they're thinking and feeling or what they're experiencing at that moment. So what comes next? Well, learned helplessness. I mean, I can't, you know, that's learned helplessness. They're feeling powerless. They're feeling like they can't change the situation. This because of this or because of that. They all have their excuses that they give. Typically, we encourage them to write down those excuses early in treatment so that they have a record of them. If they ever pop up again, they know, whoops, okay, I've got to change that. And we have them do the opposite of whatever that excuse is. Think of something that's opposite to that you can quickly think of instead of dwelling on that particular excuse. When in learned helplessness, this feeling can be prevalent in substance abusers, behavioral addicts, gamblers, pornography, and so on, but also in anxiety or depression or other conditions. This learned helplessness occurs because you're repeating over and over again the difficulty of whatever it might be, and now you're believing it to be true. You're believing I can't to be true. A lot of times that doesn't start in the middle of somebody's addiction. It starts in childhood. It starts in that developmental stage of the brain where somebody is constantly being told, you're bad, you're no good, what's wrong with you, you're stupid, you're this, you're that. Well, you hear that enough in those early years, the brain has now formed a pathway to think that way. And that pathway gets stronger over time. And as we've said before, the neuropath, the dendrites that stick out, you have a little knuckle that will form in those dendrites. As something gets reinforced over and over again, the little knuckle will grow in that dendrite, and it'll make that passageway, that information along that passageway stronger. And that knuckle will shrink over time, but because it was once there, it makes it easier to grow back again. It makes it easier to reinforce this negative pathway of thinking when there's reminders later on. And that's where we want to catch those things early on. So this feeling is often prevalent, that learned helplessness. And they might perceive relapse as inevitable at this point, reducing their motivation to seek alternatives. Neurobiological factors can also occur. Now that's the stuff in the brain, that's the chemistry, that's the metabolic flow, that's the changes that will occur. For example, the epigenetic changes that occur. You can't change your DNA, but you can change the switches turning on and off that turn on and off certain things about the DNA, certain a belief or behavior. You can turn it on or off through epigenetic changes, but we want to keep those good things turned on, the bad things turned off. So addiction alters brain chemistry. Now, when I say addiction, also depression, anxiety, faulty beliefs, those things that are causing problems over and over again, that's like an addiction. It turns those switches on and off. The epigenetic changes occur and that affects your decision making. And it makes you more impulsive as well. It decreases impulse control. The brain's reward system during this time becomes wired to prioritize whatever it is that you have a weakness of. It's going to wire it to prioritize turning to that weakness, making it challenging to consider other options. We don't want to mess with our brains. And when you take substances, even if they're prescribed substances, you take the prescribed substances as prescribed. You don't abuse them. Because if you abuse them, they're going to change your brain. They're prescribing, for example, a lot of states now allowing the doctors to prescribe marijuana for anxiety or for certain other things. Look, it's going to change the brain. It's damaging to the brain. Just because you get a prescription that you can smoke marijuana doesn't mean it's healthy for you. Yeah, maybe it might calm you for a moment, but it actually is going to make it worse. So smoking marijuana to calm yourself, even if you have a prescription and it's legal, it's going to make the anxiety worse, or it's going to make the depression worse. Because as you're coming off of it, it enhances what you're taking it for. And it makes it worse, making you feel like you need more and more. Well, before you know it, you've damaged the brain to where now you're not thinking clearly, you can't think clearly, and you're actually dumbing yourself down over time. You become unmotivated, unable to carry through with even the simplest of tasks. Why do that? Go to the doctor, get prescribed medication, take it as prescribed, and be monitored by your doctor or your counselor, so you don't abuse whatever it is. But if something's not working, there's something out there that'll help, that'll be working. And certainly you have your relationship with God as well, that we'll talk about in a moment, that's helpful. Lack of support is another factor in this option reduction, because when you're rejecting, when you're withdrawing, when you're not thinking straight, I mean, who wants to be around somebody who's not thinking straight? You know, or who has distorted thinking? You know, what happens? Well, they don't call you anymore. They don't want to come over anymore, or whatever. So your support system is evaporating. A perceived or actual lack of support from family, friends, or healthcare professionals can lead to a feeling of isolation and limited choices. Now I've really got an option reduction going on here. Additionally, lack of access to effective treatment or recovery resources because you're not going, or you didn't go when you had an appointment and now the doctor has canceled you and he doesn't want to see you anymore. Or the group, perhaps it's a closed group, and if you don't participate, if you miss a couple of sessions, you're not in that group anymore. So participate, but this option reduction, you don't want to participate, so you're not going to these places, and then suddenly you realize, I got nowhere to go, or I got nobody to help me. So what occurs with these options that we see happening in this period is paranoia. They start to think everyone's against them. It's a projection, actually. They've been against everyone. They've been rejecting. They've been conspiring to manipulate to get what they want, whatever it might be. All of a sudden, it starts to turn around. Now they're projecting those very thoughts onto other people, and they become paranoid. Oh, they're out to get me. They're out to manipulate me. They're watching me where you used to watch them. They're watching me. I can't trust anyone. You couldn't trust anyone. Now you're seeing them not trusting you. That's paranoia. When paranoia grows, what do? You become more afraid of others, so you isolate more. Fear intensifies, fear and apprehension. That intensifies self-protection. And what does that mean? Well, that means escape would be the next thing to occur. I need to escape to feel better, or I need to escape to stay safe. And in that combination, control is lost. And out of control is the next big problem that occurs with option reduction. Paranoia involves an exaggerated or unfounded mistrust or suspicion towards other individuals, often characterized by a pervasive feeling of being persecuted or targeted, as I mentioned earlier. Paranoia can trigger a cascade of complications, so it's not just one little thing, it's a cascade. It's like rocks falling and just causing other rocks to fall. It complicates and it reduces the options for recovery, for getting well. Individuals feel isolated and unsupported, and that might make it difficult for them to think about options, but to have options. Because when they start feeling that way, they don't want to go to the counselor. They don't want to go to the friend or the family member. They're turning inward now. They're staying in their isolation. So all of a sudden now I have to escape. I can't take this anymore. I need out. And so escape from negative emotions, stress, and traumatic experiences, mental escape to avoid thinking of consequences. Well, all right, how do I escape? Well, I did well escaping before with drugs or with alcohol or with gambling or with something else. Those escapes take your mind off of the paranoia, off of whatever is making you discomforted. And now, okay, I know that worked before, but they're not thinking through the consequence of it. They're just thinking of the benefit that it gave them before. And out of control then happens. Feeling out of control is often linked with impaired decision-making abilities. Executive functions is part of your control, the forefront of your brain, the top half, as we've spoken of many times before, the upper room of the brain. Your executive functioning is going on up there, thinking, detailing, and all that good thinking. Basement of the brain, negative thinking, fearful thinking, self-protection, that limbic system area where the alarm goes off and the adrenaline starts to pump, and before you know it, you become impulsive and all those other things. So we can't plan when we're in the basement of the brain. We can react emotionally. The intensity is too strong because of the adrenaline and the stress hormones flowing. We're not problem solving. We're not fixing anything. We're actually in a self-protective mode, which can result in anger, withdrawal, which would result in depression, anxiety, which would result in panic attack, because if that anxiety, what can I do? I can't do anything. And there's an implosion that occurs. Too much adrenaline goes into the system, and there's panic, foreseeing consequences as negative, terrible, awful. Before you know it, I need something quick. So emotional dysregulation is a common challenge among individuals with substance use disorders or other issues where that emotional instability leads them to being out of control. High levels of stress can do that as well, and so we want to keep the stress levels reasonable. We need stress. Stress is a good thing. We don't want too much stress. We want just enough to keep us motivated, to keep us getting up and doing things and active and feeling constructive, feeling like there's purpose. You take away all that stress, we're just gonna kind of sit there. We're not gonna be motivated to do much of anything. So high levels of stress are a significant trigger for relapse, leading to anxieties and future consequences that need immediate relief. Social and environmental factors, such as being in an environment that triggers the memories of substance use. Some of those bad memories might be in bad activities, unpredictable activities, high stimulating activities. So before you know it, you're attending a concert, or you're somewhere where there's a lot of high stress going on, a lot of stimulation going on. Well, what's that going to do? It's going to remind you of the past, and it's going to bring up the feelings along with the memory. And in some cases, the memory may not come up, but the feelings come up, making it even more confusing as to why you're feeling that way at the moment. In talking about option reduction, one thing came to mind, and that was Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And I thought, well, what can we learn from his experience, from how he went through that very stressful time. He exemplified absolute candor during that time. He acknowledged, in other words, I'm really stressed right now. I need you to sit with me, or I need you to be here as I'm praying or thinking or whatever it might be. He was acknowledging the intensity of what he knew was going to happen. He knew he was going to the cross. He knew he was going to be tortured and all those things. That intensity was so great, but he acknowledged it. He asked for support from the disciples. Hang around. I don't want to be alone right now. Hang around. His willingness to be vulnerable and transparent about his feelings is a lesson in emotional honesty. When the options are reduced, we want to be emotionally honest. We want to say, hey, I'm having a tough time right now. Could you help me? Or could you just talk to me? Or just go to the counselor and just talk. A lot of people will come and they'll just talk. You might not have a fix for them, but suddenly they feel better because they're talking. They have someone they can talk to who's not going to be judgmental, who's not going to be critical, and so on. He demonstrated in the Garden of Gethsemane the importance of seeking support as he enlisted in the companionship of the disciples and the vigilance of the closeness of friends. Jesus turned to prayer, laying his burdens before the Father. He didn't just say, I can do this by my might. No, he reached out for help. God, in Jesus, reached out for help. Now, I know that doesn't fit right, does it? It doesn't. How do you compute that in your mind? But he was half man, half God. He had the deity of God within him. He could have grasped that deity and used that power, but he chose not to. He chose to stay in human emotions, human thought, human limitations. And in those limitations, he knew he needed to reach out for help. And he did. We need to reach out for help in our limitations. When we feel like everything's imploding, when we feel like nothing is working, when we feel all alone, hopeless and helpless, powerless, invalidated, rejected, abandoned, perhaps shamed, confused occurs when that happens, we need to reach out for help. Because if we don't, we're resting in the basement, intensity is going to increase, which is going to increase bad decision making one way or another. So Jesus gave us the example of communing with the Father, gaining that spiritual companionship for comfort in a time of distress. Now, it might be a friend, a family member for you, someone you trust, or it might be your pastor, your Christian counselor, your doctor, or someone else. Reach out. Don't rest in the basement of the brain in this time of option reduction, because you're not going anywhere other than down. What does the Bible say about this? Well, in Hebrews chapter 4, verses 14 to 16, in the Remedy Bible, which is a paraphrase of the Bible, utilizing the key words and the additional meanings of those key words and applying it to modern day language, it says this: "Therefore, since we have a great high priest, a great physician, who has gone through the heavens, Jesus, Son of God, let us hold confidently to the truth about God and his plan to heal and restore us. For we do not have, and I want to emphasize the word not, we do not have a heavenly physician, a great high priest who is unable to connect with us, who is unable to appreciate our weakness. We have someone who can connect and who can appreciate our weakness because he went through it. He's been there. He understands. It goes on to say, our weakness, our suffering, our struggle and struggles. But we have one who in his humanity was tempted in every way exactly as we are, yet without sin. In other words, he didn't allow the wrongdoing that is sin. He didn't allow the choices to cause wrongdoing without ever giving in to selfish temptations. He didn't give in to those selfish temptations. Therefore, let us approach the throne of God's grace without fear, but confidently, realizing that he longs to dispense, to get rid of all the resources of heaven, that is to give you, to dispense all the resources of heaven. All that he has available, he wants to give to you for healing, not just so your life can be better, because sometimes life doesn't get better, does it? Sometimes we have all these trials and testings that goes on, but to help us to grow stronger, to handle those tests, those trials, those difficulties in a better way so that we can come through them stronger instead of turning back to the addictions, turning back to the weaknesses, whatever they may be. So heaven to heal us so that we may receive mercy, grace, and every benefit to give us victory in our time of need. But we got to reach out for it. We have to ask him for that help. We have to call on Jesus. Help me, Jesus. I need that help. If we can just do that, that's a start. That's a beginning. And he brings the support. He sends the callers. He sends the helpers. Things happen when we sincerely reach out for that help. And perhaps you have reached out for that help and you're walking in God and in the Lord, and you have these addictions, this recovery that you're dealing with, these weaknesses that you've been working on to get rid of, but the stress is just pulling you back into it. It's like a magnet drawing you back into it. Well, reach out again. Get that help. He'll help pull you back, and he'll send those helpers that can help with that. It's not the end of the world. It's not catastrophizing. There is hope. We want to see that light at the end of the tunnel. And that's why it's so important to stay in prayer, reading your Bible, being around people that are encouraging, hopeful, supportive, people you can trust, and stay active in purposeful ways, not just activity of playing a video game, activity of doing something that's constructive in some way that later on you can feel productive. Now, some people feel productive in video games, so I'm not downplaying that, but a lot of them just turn to that just to escape, and it's not really helping. But those that can feel productive in it, great, that's wonderful. Well, that's option reduction. Next time, we're going to talk about relapse. We're going to talk about return to use, the physical and emotional collapse that occurs. And that'll conclude this series on unmasking addiction. So I hope you'll join us for next time when we do that. May your troubles be minor, blessings more, and happiness come through your door. God bless.